Are you struggling to conceive? You have options, and at Piedmont Reproductive Endocrinology Group, we'll make sure you have the guidance and support you need. PREG is known for individualized fertility care that's unique to every patient. We take the time to provide a reassuring and empowering experience because we believe that you deserve nothing less. Let us help you on your journey to parenthood. Visit us at pregonline.com to learn more. Get the guidance and support you need at Piedmont Reproductive Endocrinology Group.
I present you the ballistic missile submarine Red October. My officers and I request asylum in the United States of America.
My name is Richard Dix, and this is How Did That Happen? A podcast where I look at everyday things or events and try to figure out how they came to be. Every week I will research one topic, and by the end of the episode, I hope to truly have the answer to the question, how did that happen? All right, welcome back to another episode of How Did That Happen? HDTH. We are doing episode number 67 this week. It's going to be about submarines. We're going to learn a lot about those ships that go underwater. We're going to learn a lot about submarines. But before we get there, as always, going to do a little housekeeping here. What am I watching? I just watched Agent Elvis on Netflix, which is just one of those things when it comes up on your feed, you're just like, you know what, I'm going to click on it just because I want to know what y'all think Agent Elvis is. And it does not let you down. I've only watched one episode, but I do intend to go back and watch more. And it's exactly what you think. Elvis is a secret agent who goes around solving crimes and murdering people, blowing stuff up and all that good stuff. He has a team that works with him. It also includes a chimp, a monkey of some sort, a gun-wielding monkey. This is a piece of work here, and I believe Elvis is Matthew McConaughey. I am not 100% sure. The guy sounds just like him. If he's not, he could not be, but it sounds like Matthew McConaughey. Definitely gonna go back. It's something that I think you probably just watch if you want to just get your mind off stuff because the plots are just ridiculous. But definitely give that a watch. I just finished Full Swing, which is also on Netflix, and it's a good show. Even if you don't like golf, it is it's a behind the scenes look at the PGA Tour and just like golf in general. It is for mature audiences. They do curse quite a bit, and there's some little bit of crude humor in there, but it really does put a different kind of face on the PGA Tour, which I feel like is something they kind of did on purpose because of what they talk about with all the live golf, with the Saudi Arabians coming in and trying to buy all the best golfers in the world. So they're kind of trying to make it look like it's not your dad's PGA Tour, but I mean it's true. And what I did not know is how these guys just fly around on private jets. Like, I mean, I didn't know how much money there was in this sport. I'll put it that way. That's probably my best way to put it. I did not know until watching. I never really realized that everybody that wins, all the winners win millions of dollars. I didn't know that's how that worked. I knew they got paid. I didn't really know how they got paid. So that's it. Like all these tournaments. Every tournament, some guy wins. You might win $2 million just for winning. Not just for winning, but I mean that's $2 million for winning a golf tournament. But it's a really good show, and I also just started watching that Formula One show also on Netflix, and that's also pretty good. I'm not sure if I'm going to keep watching it or not, but it is a background kind of behind the scenes of Formula One racing, which is also really interesting. What am I listening to? I actually just finished this book. I'm going back on my audiobook kick, so I'm going to drop in some books instead of podcasts here throughout the weeks with the what am I listening to. Just finished this book called How Am I Doing? 40 Questions to Have with Myself, and it was actually a pretty good read. It's about helping to understand who you are and kind of thinking of things from a different perspective, and also just trying to really just take a kind of stock and inventory of who you are and what's going on with you. And the author is a team psychologist for the Detroit Pistons, who also he used to play professional football himself, I believe, as well. And he has questions that are just fundamental into understanding yourself better. Really, and this isn't a plug at all. It's just really when I read it, I was just like, man, okay, I can. Not every book can you take something like a self-help. Not every self-help book helps. I've actually in my time, especially in this last year, I've read a lot of them. and some of them are good. I will say I think I mentioned this before. If you listen to the podcast, Joan Didion's book on grief, is a really good. I can't remember the name of it right now, but I remember the plot. I mean, basically, she's in her kitchen, and her husband's in the living room reading a paper. And he just dies, and so she has to just, but like she's cooking dinner and like she doesn't, and he's dead in the living room, and so she has to like deal with this whole like my husband's gone, just in this really just random moment. You weren't prepared for it at all. There was no car accident. There wasn't a stroke. He's just gone. It's really a good message on grief. But yeah. That's what I'm watching. That's what I'm listening to. Check that out if you guys, if it sounds interesting to you. Like I always say, if I plug that stuff, I can plug my own episodes. Every Thursday at 4:30 a.m. we have the bite-sized bios, the mini episode accompaniment to HTTH. It comes out. We profile a lot of different people now. We're up to 24 episodes. I think the last episode was Bing Crosby. That one was pretty good. We've done Nigel Houston, Jackie O, Nelson Mandela, Malcolm X, Hillary Clinton, Ellen DeGeneres, Alexander the Great, William Shakespeare, a bunch of different people. I don't know if I said Morgan Freeman or not already, but yeah, definitely check that out. We always also cover. I throw in a little bit more extra from the previous HTTH as well, things I might have missed, and kind of just give a little review of that. As always, like this wherever you are finding this podcast. 5 stars if you want to, if you really, really love it. 2 stars if you didn't like it. And want to please tell us why you didn't like it when you give us 2 stars. Constructive criticism is always welcome. As always, the extras will be over at htthappen.com. You'll find all there might be some good ones with these because I'm trying to include more videos from the videos that I watch, and I forget to put them on the works site, but I'm trying to get better about that. But yeah, on the socials at HTThappen as well. I don't think there's much else to say. I am still thinking, and I'm really close to doing the idea of what I talked about of having going weekly episodes, or the HTTH coming out every 2 weeks, doing 2 episodes a month, and then having the bite-sized bios have their own actual weeks, maybe have them be in standalone episodes. Going to be a lot of changes and transitions over these next few weeks and months. We'll see what happens. But before I start rambling too much, without further ado, as we're going to do, here is the episode.
Ryan, sit here.
I'm not a naval officer. I'm with the CIA.
CIA?
Well, I'm not an agent. I just write books for the CIA.
Whatever. Sit down. And do exactly what I tell you.
DSRV's away. There's a Russian Alpha about 8,000 yards to starboard.
Captain, I think it's a Konevalov.
Increase the flank.
Increase the flank. How?
All right. Today we are going to talk about submarines. And this was a subject that I didn't even realize how much I enjoyed it until I was doing the research, and I was just like, this is awesome. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I some of this stuff, I always love to learn things, but this was one where I was just like, wow, submarines have always interested me. And then to realize, and where we'll start here is the true history of the idea of submarines. I didn't know that the idea of submarines goes back thousands of years. It goes back thousands of years. Even Aristotle was talking about it. What we'll find out is that Alexander the Great was even said to have had his own submarine. So Aristotle in Problemata tells the tale of Al, as we call him. We've covered him in the BSB section of this podcast. At the siege of Tyre, I think it's Tyre, 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 maybe. In 332 BC, he orders divers to destroy any submarine defenses the city might undertake to build. And so basically, because he mentions that, there's no actual record of what he was talking about, but people seem to think that because he even mentioned that there must have been some sort of like submersible vehicle that existed. And they even have an idea as to what it would have looked like. It was something like a diving bell, and it's like a big glass ball, kind of. It's more shaped like a teardrop, and they would kind of lower it down, and it would be watertight, and he would be in there, and he was able to evidently see, you could see around underwater. And so it was basically, it wasn't just him. It would be usually him and like 2 other guys, according to legend. And there's a lot. I mean, you could say, I say legend just because it's just hard to believe, but there's no like real concrete evidence. There's a lot of mystery that surrounds Alexander the Great and all the different stuff that he did. But this was even mentioned in the late 1800s in France. They wrote some accounts about it. So evidently this guy was like the first person to actually, go underwater. And I mean, Aristotle, he seemed to think that that he did it as well. And I mean, this wasn't, and I do want to mention, and we're going to talk a little bit later about kind of ancient diving. There's going to be a part in the things I didn't know before section that kind of goes into that. But people have been going underwater for a long time, even back during this time, and probably even before then. So they had seen the idea of, they had been underwater, but it's the idea of having a vehicle or some sort that you could be underwater with, or something that could allow you to not have to worry about holding your breath for such a long period of time. That was something that people will continue to work towards. And so what we'll get to now is kind of the first real recorded submarine, and then also I'll kind of tell you how submarines work, because I did not really know before this. And so the first serious discussion of a quote-unquote submarine, a craft designed to navigate underwater, appeared in 1578 from a man by the name of William Bourne. And it's spelled just like the Bourne Identity guy, Bourne. And he was a British mathematician, and he wrote on naval subjects. He proposed a completely enclosed boat that would be submerged and rowed underwater, and it would consist of a wooden frame covered with waterproof leather. Wow. And it would be submerged by reducing its volume by contracting the sides through the use of hand vices. Some real steampunk stuff here. He did not actually make this boat. He just kind of dreamed it up. And then later on, a guy named Cornelius, I'm not sure. No, I think it is Cornelius. Well, I guess either one actually is what I'm reading here. He was a Dutch inventor. He was the guy who actually first made a submarine, but he was said to have used a large amount of the schematics and ideas that our buddy Bourne Identity used back in 1578. And so between 1620 and 1624, he successfully maneuvered his craft to depths of 12 to 15 feet but beneath the Thames River in England. And King James I was even said to have been on there as well. I mean, this stuff really is, this was some of the fascinating stuff. To me, the entire idea of submarines themselves is fascinating. The fact that we've actually somewhat mastered that craft or idea is still mind-boggling. When we'll get to the more modern submarines later, but I mean, the fact that we can even possibly say that 3,000 years ago that they had submarines is something that I definitely did not know this before I came into this research. I wonder if you guys had any idea. But even to say 500 years ago, we had submarines. People were making vessels to go underwater. It boggles my mind. But back to Mr. Drebel's submarine. And so it was, like I said, it was a lot like old Bourne Identities. It was a lot like what he did. They had the same outer hull that had the greased leather over a wooden frame. I wonder why they chose that. And it had oars that extended through the sides and sealed with tight-fitting leather flaps. They provided a means of propulsion both on the water and under the water. So they had like, I guess, kind of oars that came out, and that was how it navigated itself throughout to get around, which is okay. So that's like their propulsion. And so that would kind of be, the way submarines looked for a while, probably for the next about 100 years or so. He would go on to make a couple larger versions of what he had initially made, but not really changing the technology that much. But by 1727, there were no fewer than 14 different patents for submarines who had really gotten into the whole idea of going underwater. And there was one guy who, I guess he doesn't actually get credited. It was an unidentified inventor, but he proposed what I think is probably the real beginnings of how modern submarines work, is the idea of going up and down, going surfacing and going back underwater, and doing so with goat skin bags that will be attached to the hull. He planned to submerge the vessel by filling the skins with water, and then to surface by forcing the water out of the skins with a twisting rod. And this arrangement was, like I said, the forerunner for really how modern submarines work, and they use what's called it's a ballast tank is what it's called. So he was creating the idea of a goat skin ballast tank, and that is how submarines go up and down. I think I have a little bit more on that. So yeah, the ballast tanks are basically, and so going to kind of jump to the idea of like kind of how a modern submarine works. Because I mean, this is the technology that still exists now, just in a much more streamlined and modern way. There are spaces in between the two hulls that can be filled with either air or water. These are also, these are called the ballast planks. And then with diving planks, they give a sub control over the buoyancy, which is the main part they're trying to really keep control over. When the ballast tanks are filled with air, the submarine rises to the surface, which because it has positive buoyancy and with water inside the tanks, the sub will have negative buoyancy, and so it will sink down deeper into the ocean. And so the way they control this is they have these little kind of wings on the side, almost like a shark's fin. They're called diving planes or hydroplanes, and they work like wings, kind of, and they control surfaces. Kind of like an airplane would as well. They create an upward force called lift. You know what I mean? So it's almost like a submarine is flying through the water, which is something that I didn't know. I really didn't know that either. I thought they were just straight up, just like, I don't know, like torpedo shaped, machines. They actually have like wings. Submarines have wings, and that actually makes more sense as to how they move about underwater. And so that will bring us to submarines in warfare, which for the most part is what will be covered here, because that's where you see the most use of submarines. You do see them in like really deep diving, expeditions and stuff like that. I may have some of that in here, but I don't think that I do. But submarines in warfare. So the first time we really see submarines being used as a weapon is in the American Revolution, which of course was from 1775 to 1783. Which, just an aside for that, I don't know. I guess I'll just go ahead and in my head, because I read George Washington's biography a couple of years ago, and that's when I really understood that yes, 1776 is like the year we declared our independence, but we literally didn't win it for 7 more years. That's just a history side note, something that I was probably 30 years old before I knew that. I thought 1776 was when it was all over. 1776 is when it just began. But that's a completely, I guess, not too off the beaten path, because we are talking about the American Revolution. So the submarine was called the Turtle. It was a one-man craft that was invented by David Bushnell, who was a student at Yale, and was built of wood and in the shape of a walnut. It could stand on one end. I'm not sure what that means. Submerged, the craft was powered by propellers cranked by the operator. And so the plan was to have the Turtle make an underwater approach to a British warship, right? Attach a charge of gunpowder to the hull by a screw device operated from within the craft, and then leave before the charge exploded, because they would use a time fuse. In the actual attack, however, the Turtle was unable to force a screw through the copper sheathing in the warship's hull, and nothing really happened. I have a little bit more information on that. The guy that was in the craft was Ezra Lee. So it was not the man that made it. It wasn't Bushnell, but it was a guy named Ezra Lee. He pulled up beside this 64-gun, big, huge boat called the HMS Eagle in New York Harbor on September the 7th, 1776. Like we said, he could not get the screw through the hull, and so basically he just kind of left, and then the bomb exploded nearby, and neither one of them, the ship didn't blow up, neither did he blow up. That's kind of just yeah. So but they tried. They can you imagine? This is like 400 years ago. I mean, I feel like is there a movie about this? There should be a movie about this, because I've seen movies about the American Revolution, and I don't think they were ever talking about submarines. I don't think that was ever mentioned. And so when you read this, I was almost having to take a double take and be like, so there really were submarines in pretty much every war after that. So every war for the last, what is that? I don't want to get the math wrong. Is it 250 years? There's been submarines? I mean, I didn't think that going into this. I didn't see that coming. And so the next advancement in submarine technology comes from a U.S. inventor by the name of Robert Fulton. He was really into experimenting with submarines and even steamboats as well. He was really into a bunch of different type of inventions. But he would end up with a grant from Napoleon Bonaparte, which is just crazy when all this history kind of lines up like that. He would end up working on a submarine called the Nautilus. It had a collapsing mast and sail that were provided for the surface propulsion, and then it had a hand-turned propeller that drove the boat when they were underwater. And it did pretty much the same thing with the same technology with the ballast tanks. It used, took on water to go down and kind of pushed it out to go back up. And they even had, this is because I was wondering how they would do light down there, right? And so they had candles. That's still what you had. This is around 1800s, I think it's 1801, when he actually finished the construction for the Nautilus. And so there was enough space down there for them to have 4 dudes and 2 candles that could burn for 3 hours. This is odd spans of time and numbers. Then later they would actually add a tank of compressed air, which I didn't even know they had that back then. And the French made this so they could do the same thing that the Turtle had kind of done in their war endeavors. But it also never really got off the ground. It would actually end up sinking a ship in a test in 1805. But once that had been done, nobody really wanted this technology. The French weren't even really, loving what he did.
Judy was boring.
Hello.
Then Judy discovered ChumbaCasino.com.
It's my little escape.
Now Judy's the life of the party.
Oh, baby, mama's bringing home the bacon.
Whoa, take it easy, Judy. The Chumba life is for everybody. So go to ChumbaCasino.com and play over 100 casino-style games. Join today and play for free for your chance to redeem some serious prizes. ChumbaCasino.com. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18 plus terms and conditions apply. See website for details.
Lucky Land Casino, asking people, what's the weirdest place you've gotten lucky?
Lucky? In line at the deli, I guess?
Aha, in my dentist's office. More than once, actually.
Do I have to say?
Yes, you do.
In the car before my kids' PTA meeting.
Really?
Yes.
Excuse me, what's the weirdest place you've gotten lucky?
I never win and tell.
Well, there you have it. You can get lucky anywhere, playing at LuckyLandSlots.com. Play for free right now. Are you feeling lucky? No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18 plus. Terms and conditions apply. See website for details.
England, he offered it to England. England was like, no, I'm good. No thanks. He came back to the U.S., And when he did this, he came back and he ended up seeking and getting congressional approval to work on a submarine for America. But things fell through. It was supposed to be a huge steam engine that could carry like 100, or steam engine power submarine that could carry like 100 people. It was going to be called the Mute, which is, why would you? I mean, I guess because it's silent. I guess that was the whole play on words. But yeah, he ended up dying, and they ended up thinking that submarine just ended up rotting in some shipyard. So kind of a sad tale from Robert Fulton. But we'll get to the next use of submarines in warfare, and that was in the Civil War. Once again, if you had told me that they used submarines in the Civil War, I wouldn't have believed you. I mean, I know that, I don't know, you think it's the technology is relatively new. You realize humans have been messing around with that for, like I said, thousands of years. And so we really see it was the Confederates who kind of messing around with submarines the most, I believe, here. They made one in 1862 called the Pioneer, 34 feet long, was driven by a hand-cranked propeller, operated by 3 men. Never really saw any wartime. They made another one. Let's see here. It was 25 feet long. Supposed to have a battery and electric motors, but I guess that never got off the ground. I don't know. It was sunk in Mobile Bay while it's trying to attack the enemy. So, like, really, the most of these early attempts are just they're fruitless. They're just, nothing really happens. And so we see that submarines first become a real major factor in war in World War I, which was really, I think, when we see a lot of technology start to kind of propel. And then over the next 30, 40, 50 years, I think the war machine as it is, if you think about it, just from that point, from 1914, skip ahead for the next 50 years into the mid 60s, right? America fights in 3 wars in 60 years. That's crazy when you think about it. I mean, we haven't. That's why I think that's why we're such different people when you think about it, as far as like the generations, and you wonder why everything is different. Like we're not going through that right now. I've been alive for 32 years, and so over half of that, we haven't been through 3 wars. Like 3 real wars. We've been through wars. Yeah, but they weren't on the same scale. I really don't believe. You could say we've probably been through 1. I would probably truthfully count Iraq and Afghanistan together, not because I know they're completely different and completely different focuses and all that, but I'm saying as far as the time and the resources, I think the money was probably cut from the same, kind of when they were dividing it up. But yeah, I don't know. That was just a side note to think. It's just you wonder if it's 60 years, you fight 3 wars, 3 really significant wars that changed the whole direction of humanity, really. All right, off subject, but submarines, yeah, they really get kicking in World War One, and by this time the Germans have created the U-boat, which would really be I think what everybody would kind of look at and kind of want to emulate as time would go forward. The first U-boat was made in 1905, and it was really, I think, one of the first real submarines to be successful with all the different things that they were trying to accomplish. Because before this, and I kind of skipped over a couple things that I'm not even sure if it's worth going back and really going in depth with. But there were times where all the different superpowers, in the world were trying to figure out if they wanted to go with submarine technology. And, we talked about Robert Fulton, I believe his name was, who tried to push his submarines to the French, the British, and eventually came to, over to America. They had they were trying different types of power. They were trying steam power. They were trying, diesel engines. They were using battery power, different things, but none of them, I mentioned, most of the ones that I mentioned before were just not successful, and nothing, I think, really had been successful up until we see the German U-boat in 1905. And so like I said, around World War One, pretty much all of the major navies in the world were trying to include some sort of submarine in their fleet, but they were usually pretty small, and really nobody really believed in them as being a viable option if, as far as like really trying to attack or get something done. Because we've seen in the past they hadn't really worked. But when we get to the U-boat, we do see it's pretty successful. They're the first submarine to successfully use torpedoes underwater and sink a ship. They pretty much everybody jumped on the bandwagon with that afterwards. And so the U-boats will be powered by a oil engine while they were on the surface, and then they would have an electric motor when they were below the surface of the ocean. And so this really does kind of set the stage for what is and would become the modern 20th century submarine. It was propelled by diesel engines and underwater by battery powered electric motors. It would have diving planes that we talked about, having kind of like wing type things, kind of like really just flying. They're kind of flying through the ocean. They'd be armed with torpedoes mainly. They would have guns and stuff for when they would surface. But the main function I think of submarines during that time and still now is their stealth, and then being able to shoot torpedoes or missiles, as we'll see, nuclear missiles at any given time. And then of course we get to nuclear submarines, which I'm not going to get too deep into them because that's pretty much where we are now, in history. But there are some interesting things about submarines that I think, like, up until 2014, submarines basically operated on an 18-hour day, and then it's because they're below they don't have windows, they're underwater, so they can kind of create their own time. And so they would have literally an 18-hour day. So sailors would spend 6 hours on watch, 6 hours on maintenance and training, and then another 6 hours basically, sleeping, I guess. And they would go back and kind of just do that over and over and over again until 2014, where they started to use the 24-hour schedule. I thought that was pretty wild. But it makes sense, like I said, when you think about it, because you can kind of control a circadian rhythm down there because the sun's not doing it. You're not seeing sun and moon. You're not getting night and day. You have to kind of create it yourself. But as far as the U.S. Navy goes, there are, I think, 55,000 enlisted sailors and 5,000 officers that kind of make up the whole submarine kind of group that exists over there. But I will get into, before we get out of here, there's one or two more things I want to mention before we get out of here. I'm going to talk about escaping submarines. That's something that has always kind of kept me from wanting to get on one, because I'm just like, how do we get off if something goes wrong? They have an entire different kind of number of different things that you can use. Before we get to there, I wanted to talk about my favorite submarine movies. If you're like me, then you love submarine movies. You may not be like me, and if you're not, let me turn you on to some good ones. Of course, there is the movie Crimson Tide with Gene Hackman and Denzel Washington. It is a great it's a great movie, and it turns out that it's somewhat true in the storyline, because I watched a lot of videos on submarines before I did this podcast, and they were talking about they're very secretive on those submarines. They talk about the idea that they get their orders, their mission, and they go do it, but they don't communicate back with like the home base, because that would give away their position. So they're out there, and then so they'll go weeks, months, without talking to anybody. So they don't know what may or may not have changed, what stuff has happened, and so that's kind of the basis of the movie of Crimson Tide. Is they have their mission, and then they get another what's like kind of a new message, but it's only like halfway. They don't get the whole message.
Captain, got the EAM. What do you think?
I think there's nothing on this.
Yes, sir. It got cut off during the attack.
Then it's meaningless.
Sir, this is an EAM pertaining to nuclear missile.
No, Mr. Hunter. That's a message fragment.
Because it got cut off during the attack, so the message can mean anything. It can be a message to a board. It can be a message.
It could be a fake Russian transmission.
Which is exactly why we need to confirm, sir. All I'm asking for is the time we need to get back online.
Calm down, Mr. Hunter.
I am calm.
And so it kind of contradicts what their initial mission was. And so they have to kind of, the XO and the CO fight back and forth. Gene Hackman and Denzel Washington fight back and forth as to what they should actually do. They don't have any contact with the outside world. It's a really good movie. U-571 is also another good movie. That's a World War II one. The Crimson Tide was set, kind of in a modern time. They're on a nuclear submarine. It's made in like the mid '90s. And of course, The Hunt for Red October is always, a good one. You got Sean Connery and Alec Baldwin. Great movie, but yeah, it's just definitely. I think that's where probably where my love of submarines comes from, is all those different good movies. If you have a good submarine movie, you want to drop it in the Twitter or put it on the website and let us know, man. Tell everybody, because I think these are awesome movies. But yeah, but we'll get to the escape part, and then we'll go ahead and get you guys out of here. So the first kind of thing to use to kind of escape from a submarine was kind of, I believe I kind of get it mixed up. It's either the Momsen Lung or the Steinke hoods. I'm not sure. I don't want to call it Stanky hood, because the Momsen Lung was used before World War II, and I'm going to have pictures of all this on the website. It's going to be a little bit hard to describe. You definitely want to check it out, though. They basically recycled the breathing gas by using a counter lung containing soda lime to remove the carbon dioxide. And the lung was initially filled with oxygen and connected to a mouthpiece by twin hoses containing one-way valves for one breathing in and the other for breathing out. The only time it was ever, I think, actually used was in World War II in 1944 on the USS Tang. That's a cool name, Tang. Yes, 13 men were actually picked up. No, five men were picked up by the Japanese. 30 men survived overall, but some of them used the Momsen lung during this. It doesn't say the actual number of men who did. It does say some tried, and so they got knocked out of their mouth, because, I mean, it's something you have to hold on to during this entire, like, tumultuous time of trying to get out of a submarine that's filling with water. Is the whole thing, which is why I was so interested about this stuff, because that's always been the thing that's been on my mind. Thinking about going underwater, it's like, you hope nothing happens. And then there's the Steinke hood, which was named for the guy who made it, Lieutenant Harris Steinke. This was done, so I believe, in 1961. Oh, no. Yeah, no, it was invented and tested in 1961 by escaping from the USS Balao at 318 feet deep. And after that, it became the standard equipment in all submarines for the U.S. Navy throughout the Cold War. So the Steinke hood, and that's also going to be on the website. It kind of is just like a hood-looking thing. It completely encloses the wearer's head and traps a bubble of breathable air. So it's designed to kind of assist to make you buoyant as well to go up. So it's almost like you're putting on like it doesn't look like this, but it's like an astronaut helmet of like air basically. But like I said, it does not look like that. It's kind of like the concept of it though. And so that would be the main way that people would use if they had to escape until the 2000s. We get to the submarine escape immersion equipment. Now this stuff does look futuristic. It legit is a suit that becomes a life raft, and it's really cool technology. It actually has been around since 1952, but it finally come to be used as a standard, like I said, around the 2000s. And I have pictures of that as well. It's really cool. It's just that you put it on, and boom, once you float to the surface, you become a boat. It's like a little raft. It's pretty cool. And that is how submarines happened. And now it's time for the roundup. And we're going to round it up. Alexander the Great created the first submarine. Cornelius Drebbel created the first relatively modern submarine idea. The American Revolution saw the first military use of a submarine. Things I didn't know before. And now I know them. Never heard of these things. What are they? Alright, so for the things that I didn't know before segment, I think I have like two, really. Nothing crazy, just a interesting story, and then I'll tell you what, I'll start off with the sponges, and then we'll get to the interesting story. So the first thing that I had mentioned earlier, that people have been diving for below in the water for thousands of years. It never really occurred to me that was the case. Like we talked about before, when what episode was that? Was it toilet paper? I think it was. We talked about the sponges and the xyloph. I keep wanting to call it xylophone, but it's not. It's like xylogium. So like it's what they call their stick that had a sponge on the end that they would use to wipe their butt. And but it never occurred to me that someone had to dive down to get those sponges, and so that's. I'm not sure if there's much more to say about that, but that was just kind of me, like, kind of having a light bulb moment of just, yeah. And they said, I guess the best sponges were deeper down in the ocean, so they had to dive deeper because they were like more like, I guess, I'm not sure what made them better, but that's what they said the better ones were. Oh, then there also were these Greek divers who were evidently skilled at holding their breath for a really long time, and they would get paid to dive to the bottom of shipwrecks and retrieve like treasure and stuff like that. So I mean, they were because if you think about it, there's you can't call people who die, or like no one has a oxygen tank to go down and get it. You just have to find some guy who can really hold his breath for a long time and pay him to go down there to get stuff for you. And they said those guys would also take obviously steal some stuff while they're down there. Because what are you going to do? I mean, that's just, I guess, the tax for having someone do that for you. But yeah, there's that, and then there's this last story, which is there's a story about a submarine that was sunk by the use of their own toilet. And that is, I'll tell you a quick story about the submarine U-1206. And it was one of those late war boats that was fitted with a new deep water, high pressure toilet, which allowed them to be used while running at depth, which I guess was not something you could really do. I guess, it's kind of like when you're on an RV. It's like you have to wait till you get to a gas station, maybe. I'm not sure, I guess, how pooping worked during that time. But I guess this was a big thing for them, because now we can do it while we're down, below. Flushing these facilities was an extremely complicated procedure that required special technicians who were trained to operate them. So they had a toilet that was so advanced, you had to train somebody to be able to use it. And if you messed up while using it, it could result in a lot of seawater coming back into the boat. And so that's kind of what happened on April 14th, 1945, 24 days before the end of World War II in Europe. 24 days before this was all over, U-1206 was cruising at a depth of 200 feet below, going about 8 knots off Peterhead, Scotland, right off Scotland. And so the trainer, or whoever it was, misused the toilet, and it backfired, as it was known to do. The leak flooded the submarine's batteries located beneath the head, causing them to generate chlorine gas, leaving him with no alternative but to surface. Once it came up, it was bombed by British patrols, so they had to scuttle the submarine, meaning they had to just get rid of it. They had to abandon the submarine. 1 man died, 3 men drowned, 46 were captured. All because of that toilet. They later found the shipwreck in the 70s when BP was looking to put one of those big Deepwater Horizon things out there somewhere. And so they found it. What I'm seeing here, depending on what you read, depending on what they're saying here, I want to give you the full facts. They're saying maybe the toilet wasn't to blame. They're saying maybe something else, maybe they hit something before all this stuff happened. So maybe, just maybe, the toilet technician is not at fault here. God rest his soul. He might still be alive. All right, that was a good episode. I think learned a lot about submarines. There's so much. There's a lot to this, but I thought the biggest thing for me that I wanted to bring forward was the fact that humanity as a whole have been trying to do submarines for thousands of years. That's something that I really did not even think about when I got into this. When I started to do the research, I thought we would go back to maybe the Middle Ages, something like that. But then you're like, oh wow, Alexander the Great had a submarine, supposedly, maybe kind of, that Aristotle mentioned, But that was a really big thing for me. The movies as well, like I said, I really love submarine movies for whatever reason. They've always interested me. I don't think I could probably do it, as far as like what these guys do. I think there's a certain, because what they mentioned also, and what I'll say, I don't think I mentioned it in the other parts, is that at least for the U.S. Navy, the entire staff is volunteer. They volunteer from what they were doing to go work in a submarine. No one gets they don't pick you and tell you you're going to be in a submarine. So everybody there wants to be. This whole process and all this stuff, but that was a very interesting thing for me to know, to learn. I didn't realize that kind of changes it, and then when hearing that, I'm like, I don't know if I would volunteer for that. I'm not, I wouldn't say I'm afraid. It's more like I'm afraid mentally. I think I could do it, but I don't know. There's a lot of stuff. I don't know if that's for me, but I hope you guys enjoyed it. As I always say, if you like this, give us a like and subscribe wherever you hear this. 5 stars would be great. 2 stars if you didn't want to give us 5 stars. Tell us why you didn't want to give us 5 stars. Constructive criticism is always welcome. Hit us on the socials, HTT Happen, website, htthappen.com. Always appreciate you guys coming back week to week, press and play. I really do. It means a lot to me that people would even want to hear and talk about the stuff that I find interesting. So definitely thank you guys for that. See you in a couple days with the next BSB.
Judy was boring.
Hello.
Then Judy discovered ChumbaCasino.com.
It's my little escape.
Now Judy's the life of the party.
Oh, baby, mama's bringing home the bacon.
Whoa, take it easy, Judy. The Chumba life is for everybody. So go to ChumbaCasino.com and play over 100 casino-style games. Join today and play for free for your chance to redeem some serious prizes. ChumbaCasino.com. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+ terms and conditions apply. See website for details.